So I think when we talk about who's going to take Chuck's place, it's like asking the question, who's going to take Billy Graham's place? And the answer is nobody, because Billy Graham is Billy Graham. It's not an office, it's a person. It's a person that God raised up. Who's going to take Spurgeon's place? Who's going to take... No one takes Spurgeon's place. God raises up certain people in history that stand apart. And they are who they are, and they come and they make their mark, and they leave their legacy. And then they inspire others. And so no one will replace Billy, and I don't think anyone will replace Chuck. It's not an office, it's a man. And so but Chuck believes that many people have been raised up in this movement as leaders that we would all recognize. Here's two of them right here. And others that we look to, that we respect, we love their ministries. And Chuck believes that God will use them to speak to us and to inspire us in the days ahead. So really we're dealing with two separate issues. And issue number one is who will become the pastor of Calvary Chapel of Costa Mesa. And Chuck is leaving that in the hands of the Lord. And he believes the Lord will lead. And he has not said, and he is not prepared to say at this point, unless you want to say something to that, Chuck. And then as far as the leader of the movement, he feels that God will raise up many leaders. Now, I defer to Chuck and I defer to Brian for any more on that topic.
Yeah, and I'm happy to talk about it. And I think, Greg has pretty much said it, but I think, making the distinction is first of all important. Of course, I get asked this question probably more than anybody. And so I think I can speak to it. But I think making the distinction is important, because up until this point, we've had something that is sort of been one. So Calvary Chapel Costa Mesa has been, in a sense, synonymous with the movement because of Pastor Chuck. And like Greg rightly said, and like Chuck has said many times over the years, the Lord's already raised up many guys. And there is no one person that will replace him. This is a unique thing that God did. And unless God did it again, you couldn't replicate it. You just couldn't do it. And so rather than looking for, okay, well, who's the one guy, I don't think anybody should be looking for who the one guy is. I think we should just be, we all connect with each other. Some of us connect more with some than we do with others. There's a natural thing that happens, a supernatural thing. We have, different visions and things that people get behind. And so I think it's just going to sort of naturally, some will rally a little bit around one and some will rally a little bit more around another. I hope as a movement that we can all continue to work together and love each other and have conferences together and without having to feel like there has to be, one guy that's a leader. I think that's a mistaken notion. And so, in looking at the future, I think we just have to separate what has not been separated. We have to realize that Costa Mesa is a church, used to be called and still sometimes called Big Calvary. I always think the funny thing about the people at Costa Mesa and Big Calvary, they don't know they're Big Calvary. They don't know anything about the movement, so to speak. These are just sheep. This is their church. They come to church. They come to get fed. They come to get prayed for. They come to get loved. They don't think in political terms. They're not thinking who's taking over the movement. They're just saying, I've got a crisis in my family. Can you help me? My father just died. Can you do the funeral? It's the pastoral thing. And so in that regard, Pastor Chuck and I have been co-pastoring the church for the past 12 years. I fully expect to continue to pastor the church and to be the pastor of the church in the future. That's my expectation. That's why I came in the first place. And that's my plan. I believe that's God's plan. And I rest in that. I'm not trying to make anything happen. I'm there. I'm happy to serve. And Chuck and I just serve alongside. As long as the Lord has it that way, that's just the way it is. So. But I know there's all kinds of conversation all the time. There's all kinds of discussion. There are unbelievable rumors that go about. I mean, people come up to me and say, the things they've heard. It's just like, wow, we could make a movie of this stuff. I mean, some of it is just so unbelievably outlandish. So there it is. That's straight from this.
But now, Brian, because you're the pastor of of Big Calvary with Chuck, does that necessarily mean you are the leader of the Calvary Chapel movement?
Not necessarily, no. That's the whole point that
Okay.
I was making.
I know.
And I hope I made that clear.
I just wanted to emphasize that point,
Yeah.
'cause I think it's a good point.
Yeah.
But then I think my question would be then, okay, there's people God has raised up there. We talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
Are these people going to be put in place by Chuck? Will we establish a Council of Jerusalem? Is that
Well,
going
well,
to be
that's where
left
you-
up to
that's-
us to do that?
that's-
You are Chuck
And again,
Smith.
I have to ask the question, why is Bob not the Pope of Calvary Chapel? That has not been addressed
Well,
at this point.
he secretly is the Pope of Calvary Chapel. But
Chuck,
But-
do you want to address any of this?
I'll take this one.
Okay, yeah, take it.
I believe that the Bible teaches that Christ is the head of the body, his church. And I think that that is what needs to be emphasized and realized, that it isn't a person, it isn't an individual, but it is submission to Jesus Christ. And if we can do that, we're going to go forward. I think that as I was talking with some of these fellows, and we're going to be having a time, I'm going to call some of the fellows together that have been with us almost from the beginning, some of the guys that God has already demonstrated their leadership capacity. We're going to have a time of just prayer, fasting, waiting on the Lord, and just getting, hopefully, from the Lord, his direction for the future of Calvary Chapel. As far as leadership is concerned, I do see it as a multiple kind of a leadership, not an individual. And I do believe that Jesus, again, is the true leader, and he's the one we want to follow.